The request that changed everything. I never imagined that a simple request would change the course of my life. It was supposed to be just another routine day at the office, a day filled with deadlines, emails, and the usual corporate hustle. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. It all started on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. The office was unusually calm, the kind of calm that felt almost eerie, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I was at my desk, buried under a mountain of reports, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from my boss, Mr. Collins, a man known for his strict professionalism and no-nonsense attitude. "Justin, come to my office. I need to speak with you." A lump formed in my throat. My boss rarely called people into his office unless it was something important. My mind raced with possibilities. Had I made a mistake? Was I about to get reprimanded? The uncertainty gnawed at me as I stood, straightened my tie, and made my way toward his office. I knocked twice before pushing the door open. Mr. Collins was seated behind his massive mahogany desk, his piercing gray eyes scanning a document in front of him. He didn't look up immediately, making me shift awkwardly on my feet as I waited. Finally, he exhaled, set his papers aside, and fixed me with a steady gaze. "Justin," he said, his voice measured and calm, "I have a favor to ask of you." That caught me off guard. My boss was not the type to ask for favors. He delegated, he ordered, but he never asked. "Of course, sir," I replied, trying to mask my surprise. "What do you need?" He leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlocked. "My daughter, Sophia, is flying in tonight from California. I need someone to pick her up from the airport and ensure she gets home safely." For a moment, I didn't respond. I knew Sophia Collins, but only in passing. She was a name that floated around the office occasionally, spoken in hushed tones. Some of my colleagues had met her at company functions, but I had only seen her from a distance, a striking young woman with an air of confidence that made her stand out in any crowd. But she had always seemed untouchable, as if she existed in a different world from the rest of us. "I'd do it myself," Mr. Collins continued, breaking the silence, "but I have a late meeting. It's important, and I can't afford to miss it." I hesitated. Why me? Surely there were other people better suited for this task. I wasn't even the most senior employee in the company. I was just a 25-year-old marketing associate trying to climb the corporate ladder. Still, declining a request from Mr. Collins wasn't exactly an option. "Of course, sir," I said, nodding. "I'd be happy to pick her up." He seemed pleased with my response. "Her flight lands at 7:00 p.m. at Terminal B. She'll be waiting at baggage claim. Here's her number in case you need to reach her." He handed me a small slip of paper with Sophia's contact information. I took it and pocketed it, still feeling an odd sense of nervousness. This should have been a simple task, yet something about it felt different. "Thank you, Justin," Mr. Collins said, standing up. "I appreciate it." With that, I was dismissed. As I walked back to my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that this errand, this seemingly ordinary favor, was about to change everything. The airport meeting. I left work early, giving myself plenty of time to get to the airport. The drive was uneventful, but my mind was restless. I kept wondering what Sophia would be like. Would she be cold and distant, like the wealthy daughters of powerful businessmen often were? Or would she be friendly, warm, and approachable? I parked my car in the short-term parking lot and made my way to Terminal B. The airport was bustling with activity, passengers rushing past, luggage rolling across the floor, flight announcements echoing overhead. I checked my watch. 6:50 p.m. She would be here any minute. I found a spot near baggage claim and waited, scanning the crowd. Then I saw her. She was standing near the escalators, her eyes scanning the room. She looked exactly as I remembered her. Long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, a casual denim jacket over a fitted top, and a pair of stylish jeans. But there was something different about her now. Something mature, effortless, captivating. The moment our eyes met, she smiled. And that was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just a polite smile. It was genuine, warm, inviting. A smile that seemed to say, "Hey, I'm glad you're here." I felt something stir in my chest, something unexpected. I swallowed hard and walked toward her. "Sophia?" I asked, my voice steady despite the nervousness bubbling inside me. She nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Justin, right. My dad told me you'd be picking me up. Thanks for coming." "No problem," I said, returning her smile. "Did you have a good flight?" She sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It was long. "I'm just glad to be home." I reached for her suitcase, and she let me take it without hesitation. There was something effortlessly natural about the moment, as if we had known each other far longer than we actually had. As we walked toward the exit, I felt the weight of something unspoken between us. This wasn't just a ride home. It felt like the beginning of something. The drive home. The car ride was quiet at first, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that felt comfortable, the kind that comes when two people don't feel the need to force conversation. After a few minutes, I finally broke the silence. "So, how's school been?" I asked, glancing at her. She let out a small laugh, but there was something tired about it. "It's been a lot. My dad expects me to be perfect, but sometimes I just wish I could breathe, you know." I blinked, surprised at her honesty. I had expected politeness, maybe some small talk, but not this raw, unfiltered truth. "Yeah," I said slowly. "That sounds like a lot of pressure." She nodded, looking out the window. "It is, but that's just how he is. He means well, but sometimes it's suffocating." I didn't know what to say to that. Mr. Collins was a tough boss, but I had never considered what it might be like to be his daughter. The expectations, the constant scrutiny, it must have been exhausting. For a moment, I debated whether I should say anything else, but something in her expression made me want to reassure her. "You don't always have to live up to someone else's expectations," I said. "You deserve to be yourself." She turned to look at me, and for a split second, something flickered in her eyes, something deep, something real. "Thanks, Justin," she said softly. "I think you might be one of the few people who actually gets it." And with those words, something between us shifted. I didn't know what it was, or where it would lead. But one thing was certain. This was no longer just a simple ride home. It was the start of something unexpected. And I couldn't wait to find out what would happen next. A night that changed everything. The car hummed softly as I navigated through the dimly lit streets, the rhythmic sound of tires rolling against the pavement filling the silence between us. The night air outside was crisp, the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds in the distance. But inside the car, the atmosphere was heavy, not with awkwardness, but with something undeniable. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, her hands resting lightly on her lap, fingers fidgeting as if lost in thought. Every few minutes, she would glance at me, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say something. But then she'd stop herself. I wasn't sure if I should break the silence, so I let it linger, watching her through my peripheral vision. She was deep in thought, and I had no idea what was running through her mind. "Hey, Justin." She finally spoke, her voice quieter than before, almost hesitant. I glanced at her briefly before returning my focus to the road. "Yeah." She hesitated again, then let out a soft sigh. "I don't know why, but I feel like I can talk to you. It's weird, right? We barely know each other, but I feel like I don't have to pretend around you." Her words caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting her to open up so easily, especially since we had only spent a short amount of time together. "I get that," I said after a moment. "Sometimes, the people you least expect end up being the ones you feel the most comfortable with." She turned to me, her deep brown eyes searching mine, as if trying to read the sincerity behind my words. "Yeah," she whispered. "That's exactly it." For a moment, the weight of our unspoken thoughts filled the car. I had never expected this. This strange connection between us. The way our conversations flowed effortlessly, despite the fact that we were practically strangers. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the obvious truth. Sophia was my boss's daughter. This wasn't supposed to happen. An unexpected detour. As we neared her neighborhood, I glanced at the time. 7:45 p.m. We were making good time, but something inside me wasn't ready to drop her off just yet. And then, as if reading my mind, Sophia suddenly said, "Can we drive around for a bit?" I frowned slightly. "Drive around?" She nodded, looking out the window. I don't want to go home yet." "Not yet." Her voice carried a quiet sadness, and for some reason, I didn't have the heart to refuse. "Sure," I said, turning away from her house and back onto the main road. "Where to?" She shrugged. "Surprise me." A small smirk played on my lips. "All right then." With that, I took a turn and headed toward one of my favorite hidden spots in the city, a quiet park near the waterfront, away from the crowded downtown streets. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the small, nearly empty parking lot, shutting off the engine. The soft glow of streetlights illuminated the park, casting a golden hue over the walking trails. The river nearby reflected the lights like a shimmering ribbon stretching into the horizon. Sophia glanced around, then back at me. "You come here often?" "Yeah," I admitted, "when I need to clear my head." She smiled, reaching for the door handle. "Let's go for a walk." I hesitated for a split second before nodding. Conversations under the stars. The air was crisp as we strolled along the path, our footsteps slow and unhurried. The distant sound of crickets and the gentle lapping of water against the shore filled the quiet night. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, exhaling softly. "I needed this," she admitted. "Long day?" I asked. She let out a dry chuckle. "Long life." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "My dad, he's great. Don't get me wrong. He's given me everything. Education, opportunities, a future most people dream of. But sometimes I feel like I don't have a say in my own life." She stopped walking, turning to face me. "Justin, do you ever feel like you're trapped in expectations that aren't yours?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I thought about my own life, about how I had taken this job to prove myself, about how I was constantly trying to meet expectations that weren't even mine to begin with. "Yeah," I admitted, more than I care to admit. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Then you get it." And in that moment, standing under the stars with her, I realized something. Sophia Collins wasn't just my boss's daughter. She was human, flawed, searching, and just as lost as I was. A confession that changed everything. We continued walking, our conversation drifting from expectations to dreams. "I don't even know if I want to take over my dad's company," Sophia confessed. "Everyone just assumes I will. But what if I don't want that?" I nodded, understanding completely. "So what do you want?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "I don't know yet, but for the first time in my life, I think I'd want to figure it out on my own." She looked up at me then, her expression vulnerable yet determined. "And I think I'd want to figure it out with you." My breath caught. It was just a few words, spoken softly under the night sky, but they carried a weight I wasn't ready for. This wasn't just a casual moment. This was real. I stared at her, my mind racing. Was she just saying this because she felt trapped? Or was there something more, something deeper? The logical side of me screamed, "This is a bad idea. She's your boss's daughter. She's off limits." But then there was the other part, the part that had spent the last hour falling for her without even realizing it. "Justin," she said, her voice almost uncertain. I inhaled deeply, forcing a smile. "We should probably get going." Her expression faltered for a split second, as if she had expected a different response. But then she nodded. "Yeah, you're right." The drive back. A silent understanding. The drive back was quieter than before, but not because it was awkward. It was the kind of silence that held meaning, a silence that said we both know something changed tonight, but we're not sure what to do about it yet. When I pulled up to her house, Sophia didn't get out immediately. She sat there, gripping her purse, staring at the dashboard. Finally, she turned to me. "Thanks for tonight, Justin. I don't think I've ever talked to anyone like this before." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Me neither. She hesitated, then reached for the door handle. "Good night." But before she could step out, I spoke. "Sophia." She turned back, her eyes questioning. I met her gaze, my heart pounding. "You're not alone in this, all right. Whatever you decide, you don't have to figure it out alone." A slow, soft smile spread across her lips. "Thank you." And with that, she stepped out, shutting the door behind her. As I watched her disappear into the house, I exhaled heavily, my fingers gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't just some favor for my boss anymore. Something had started tonight. Something I wasn't sure I could stop. The line we shouldn't cross. The aftermath of that night. The night after dropping Sophia home, I barely got any sleep. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind kept replaying our conversation. Her words, her voice, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, like she had found something real for the first time in a long while. She had confessed more to me than I had expected. About her father, about her struggles, about how she felt trapped in a life she wasn't even sure she wanted. And yet, the thing that shook me the most was her last words before leaving the car. "You don't have to figure it out alone." It was simple, but it meant everything. Because at that moment, we weren't just two people from different worlds. We were two people lost in the same way, looking for answers neither of us had. But no matter how much my heart wanted to hold on to that connection, my head was screaming something else entirely. "She's your boss's daughter. Don't be an idiot." It wasn't just a small crush or a passing interest anymore. There was something there, something dangerous. And I wasn't sure if I could stop myself from falling deeper. The office tension. The next day at work was hell. I had expected things to feel normal, but I was so wrong. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was her. Every time someone walked past my desk, I felt on edge. And then, the worst part, Mr. Collins called me into his office. I gulped, forcing myself to stay calm as I knocked on his door. "Come in," his deep voice rang out. I stepped inside, standing stiffly as he glanced up from his laptop. His expression was unreadable, which only made my nerves worse. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Sophia told me you took a little detour last night," he said, his sharp gaze never leaving me. My stomach dropped. "Oh, shit. She did?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, rubbing his temples. "She said she wanted to drive around before heading home." He let out a deep sigh. "Look, Justin, I'm grateful you picked her up, but I need you to understand something." I braced myself. "My daughter is delicate." I frowned. "Sir, I don't think she's..." He held up a hand, cutting me off. "She's at a turning point in her life. She thinks she wants freedom, but she doesn't know what's best for her. And I don't want her making mistakes right now." I stiffened. Was he talking about me? "Of course, sir," I said carefully. "I understand." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. I don't have to tell you how much I value professionalism, do I?" There it was, the warning, loud and clear. "No, sir," I said, keeping my expression blank. "I understand completely." "Good," he said again, his tone final. "That's all, then." I left the office with my mind in turmoil. It was a clear message. Stay in your lane. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how much I didn't want to. A message I couldn't ignore. I tried, really tried, to bury everything. To forget about the way Sophia had looked at me. To push away the way my heart reacted every time I thought of her. But that evening, as I was wrapping up for the day, my phone vibrated. "Sophia." Meet me tonight. Please. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I should have said no. I should have deleted the message and walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself replying. Where? A night of no return. She told me to meet her at a small cafe on the edge of town. It was a quiet place, away from the usual crowds, tucked between old brick buildings and lined with fairy lights. The kind of place where secrets could be shared without fear. When I arrived, she was already there, waiting. She looked different, more relaxed than the night before, but also nervous. She was wearing a simple black sweater, her long dark hair pulled back into a loose bun. But it wasn't her outfit that caught my attention. It was her eyes. There was something in them, something she wasn't saying. I slid into the seat across from her, my throat dry. "You okay?" I asked softly. She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know." I leaned forward, trying to read her expression. "Talk to me." She hesitated. Then, "My dad warned you, didn't he?" I stiffened. "Yeah." She let out a humorless laugh. I figured. Silence stretched between us. Then she looked at me, something desperate in her gaze. "Justin, I don't want to be trapped anymore." I frowned. Trapped. She swallowed hard. "I love my father, but he doesn't let me breathe. He plans my life for me, who I should be, what I should do, what's right and wrong. And now he's trying to tell me who I can and can't be around." Her words hit me hard. I knew what she was saying. She was talking about us. She was saying that her father, my boss, was trying to keep her away from me. "Sophia," I said carefully, "this is dangerous." "I know," she whispered, "but I don't care." Her hand found mine across the table, fingers trembling. "I don't know where this is going," she admitted, "but I know I don't want to stop." My heart slammed against my ribs. This was it. This was the line we shouldn't cross. And yet, sitting there, looking into her eyes, I knew something else. We already had. Slowly, I turned my hand over, letting our fingers entwine. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Together." She exhaled in relief, her grip tightening. And just like that, there was no turning back. We were in this, whatever this was, and I had no idea how we were going to keep it a secret. The secret we couldn't hide. A dangerous beginning. The night I held Sophia's hand across that cafe table, I knew we had crossed a line, one that couldn't be undone. There was no more pretending, no more brushing off what we both felt. This was real. But with that reality came risk. We weren't just two people falling for each other. We were bound by rules. Rules neither of us had the power to break without consequences. Her father, my boss, had already warned me. Sophia was off limits. And yet, as I looked into her eyes that night, I knew I was already in too deep. The thought of staying away from her, impossible. So we made a decision. We would keep this a secret, at least for now. It was a reckless, dangerous game, but neither of us was willing to walk away. The office feels different now. The next few days at work were a test of my self-control. I had to pretend nothing had changed, even when everything had. I kept my head down, focused on my tasks, and avoided Mr. Collins as much as possible. But the real challenge, Sophia. She had started visiting the office more often, and every time she walked in, it was like the entire room faded away. I had to force myself not to look at her too long, not to let my expression betray me, not to make it obvious that just days ago, she had been holding my hand under a table, whispering that she didn't want to let go. She played her part well, acting like I was just another employee. But there were moments when our eyes met across the room and everything else disappeared. Moments when she walked past my desk, just a little too close, her fingers brushing against mine for a fraction of a second. Moments when she bit her lip, holding back a smile, because she knew exactly what she was doing to me. Those moments were hell. And yet, I craved them. A close call. One evening, I was about to leave work when I got a text. Sophia, meet me in the parking lot. 5 minutes. I hesitated. Was this smart? Hell no. Did I still go? Of course. I made my way outside, my pulse pounding as I stepped into the dimly lit parking lot. And then I saw her, leaning against her car, arms crossed, looking like she had just stepped out of a dream. When she spotted me, a slow smile curled on her lips. Took you long enough. I smirked. I wasn't exactly expecting a secret meeting in the parking lot. She laughed, the sound soft and dangerous. Then she stepped closer, too close. If we're keeping this secret, she murmured, we might need to be more careful. I swallowed hard, my body already betraying me by leaning in. You're the one who told me to meet you here. She shrugged. I couldn't help it. Then, before I could react, she reached up and fixed my tie. Such a small gesture, so innocent. Except it wasn't. Because her fingers lingered, her breath was warm against my neck, and suddenly, I wasn't thinking straight anymore. I moved without thinking, my hands settling on her waist, my head tilting just slightly toward her. And then, Sophia, what are you doing here? We froze. Her father's voice. Mr. Collins was standing just a few feet away. My heart stopped. Sophia reacted fast, stepping back from me as if nothing had happened. Oh, Dad, she said, her voice impossibly steady. I was just heading home. My car wouldn't start, so I was asking Justin for help. Smart, quick, believable. But was it enough? Her father narrowed his eyes, his gaze flickering between us, suspicious. Finally, he exhaled. Get in the car, Sophia. I'll have someone fix it in the morning. She hesitated for half a second before nodding. Okay. Before she left, she cast me one last look, a look that held 1,000 unspoken words. And then she was gone, leaving me standing there, face to face with my boss. I forced myself to stay calm, to look normal. Mr. Collins studied me for an agonizing moment. Then, in a voice so cold it sent a chill down my spine, he said, "Stay away from my daughter, Justin. That's not a request." And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me with a stomach full of dread, a risk worth taking. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about his warning. Stay away from Sophia. I should have. I really should have. But at midnight, I got another text from her. Sophia, are you up? I hesitated before replying. Me, yeah. Her response came almost instantly. Sophia, come get me. I need to see you. Everything in me screamed don't do it. But before I knew it, I was already grabbing my keys, breaking the rules. When I arrived, she was already waiting outside. She climbed into my car, closing the door quietly. For a moment, we just sat there, the air thick with unspoken words. Then she whispered, "My dad doesn't control my life." I exhaled slowly. Sophia. No, she cut me off. Listen to me. He doesn't get to decide who I spend time with. Her fingers found mine, lacing together. And I don't care if this is dangerous, Justin. I'm not letting you go. And that was it. The final straw. The last reason I had to walk away. Gone. I didn't answer with words. I answered by pulling her into me, my lips crashing into hers. The moment we kissed, everything else, her father's warning, the risks, the consequences, vanished. All that mattered was her. The way her hands clutched my shirt. The way she melted into me like she had been waiting for this as long as I had. The way the entire world blurred except for us. This wasn't just a mistake. This was inevitable. And as I held her in that car, with the city sleeping around us, I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back now. The secret that wouldn't stay hidden. The next morning, I arrived at work with a storm brewing in my chest. I had broken every rule. I had crossed the line completely. And worst of all, I didn't regret it. But I should have known. Secrets don't stay secrets forever. And when I stepped into the office, ready to act like nothing had happened, I saw the way my coworkers were looking at me, whispering. And then, the worst part. Mr. Collins walked past me, staring straight through me as if I didn't exist. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. And deep down, I knew we had been caught. The secret that wouldn't stay hidden. The shift in the office. Something was off. The moment I stepped into the office that morning, I felt it. The subtle change in the way people looked at me, the hushed whispers behind my back. My heart pounded as I walked toward my desk, forcing myself to ignore the weight of unseen eyes burning into me. And then I saw him. Mr. Collins. He walked through the office without a word, his jaw set, his posture stiff. He didn't look at me. He didn't even acknowledge my presence. That was worse than a confrontation. Because if he was ignoring me, that meant he knew, and he was planning his next move. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of my desk. Had someone seen Sophia and me last night? Had a coworker spotted us together? Had her father checked on her and noticed she was missing? A million scenarios ran through my head, each one more terrifying than the last. And then the email came. Subject: Meeting request. From Richard Collins. To Justin Carter. Be in my office at 2:00 p.m. My stomach dropped. This was it. The storm had arrived. Sophia's message. Barely 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Sophia. Sophia. Justin, something's wrong. My dad's acting weird. Sophia. Did he say anything to you? I stared at the screen, hesitating. What was I supposed to say? That her father had called me into his office, that I was about to walk into what was likely a firing squad. Me. He just sent me a meeting request. 2 p.m. Her response was immediate. Sophia. Shit. Sophia. I think he knows. I clenched my jaw, running a hand through my hair. I had known this was a risk, but knowing it and facing it were two very different things. Me. It's going to be fine. A lie. But she didn't need my fear right now. Sophia. I'll fix this. I frowned. Me, Sophia, don't do anything reckless. No reply. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to focus. Whatever happened, I needed to be ready. The meeting with my boss. At 1:55 p.m., I stood outside Mr. Collins's office, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I took a deep breath. Stay calm. Stay professional. I knocked once. Come in. I pushed the door open, stepping inside. He was standing by the window, looking out over the city, his hands in his pockets. Close the door, he said, his voice clipped. I did. Then he turned to face me, and the look in his eyes sent a chill through my body. He knew. No doubt about it. He studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. Do you know what the biggest mistake people make, Justin? I hesitated. Sir. They forget their place. The words were like a slap. His expression remained calm, but there was an edge to his voice. A dangerous edge. I trusted you, he continued. I brought you into this company, gave you an opportunity, and in return, you betrayed that trust. I swallowed hard. Sir, don't lie to me. The command was sharp, final. He took a step closer, his voice lowering. You think I wouldn't notice? He scoffed. The late-night texts, the stolen glances in the office, my own daughter sneaking out in the middle of the night. I froze. So he did know. Everything. A tense silence stretched between us before he spoke again. You will end this, he said coldly. Right now. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to remain calm. With all due respect, sir, that's not your decision to make. His expression darkened. You're naive if you think this is just about you and Sophia. I frowned. What do you mean? His lips curled into something dangerously close to a smirk. You really think this won't affect your career? He asked. You think people don't talk. If this gets out, you'll lose everything. Your job, your reputation, your future. I stiffened. You're a smart man, Justin, he continued. So be smart about this. Walk away. Now, before I make sure you don't have a choice. The threat hung in the air. I wanted to argue. I wanted to fight. I wanted to tell him that Sofia wasn't a business deal. She was a person. But I also knew the truth. He wasn't just her father. He was my boss. And he held all the power. A moment of decision. I left the office shaken. I barely made it back to my desk before my phone buzzed again. Sofia. Sofia. What happened? Sofia. Are you okay? I inhaled sharply. I had two options. End this now. Walk away before things got worse. Before Mr. Collins destroyed my career. Fight for her, even if it meant losing everything. I was still staring at my phone, unable to decide, when my office door opened, and Sofia walked in. She refuses to give up. She closed the door behind her, her face pale, her eyes flashing with determination. I'm not letting him control me, she said immediately. I rubbed my temples. Sofia, this is... No, she interrupted, stepping closer. I don't care what he said. I'm not letting him decide who I can and can't be with. I exhaled. Sofia, if we keep this up, he will destroy me. My job, my future, he'll take it all. She grabbed my hand. Then let him. I looked at her, startled. What? She swallowed hard. If being with you means losing my father's approval, then so be it. My heart stopped. Was she really willing to throw everything away for me? I searched her face, trying to find doubt, but there was none. For a long moment, I just stared at her. Then I made my decision. Slowly, I squeezed her hand. We'll fight this, I whispered. Her lips parted. Are you sure? I nodded. Yeah. And just like that, we weren't hiding anymore. We were at war. Against her father. Against the rules. Against everything trying to tear us apart. And I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The war we started. The fallout begins. The moment I told Sofia that I wouldn't walk away, I knew there was no turning back. It wasn't just a secret anymore. It wasn't just something we could hide in stolen moments and whispered conversations. We had chosen to fight, but we didn't realize just how hard the fight was going to be. The silent storm at work. The next morning, I walked into the office knowing the atmosphere would be different, but I wasn't prepared for just how much. Everywhere I went, people looked at me differently. Some whispered. Some smirked, as if they knew something they weren't supposed to. Some simply avoided me altogether. And when I saw Mr. Collins, his face was a mask of cold indifference. He didn't call me into his office. He didn't fire me. But he didn't have to. Instead, he did something worse. He made my job hell. Suddenly, deadlines were tighter. Tasks were reassigned without notice. Meetings I was supposed to attend were mysteriously canceled. It was clear he wanted me gone. But he wasn't going to fire me outright. That would be too easy. No, he wanted me to break, to give up and leave on my own. And I almost did. Except for one thing. Sofia, her father's ultimatum. It was 2 days later when she called me, her voice shaking. Sofia, meet me. Now. I didn't ask questions. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the empty parking lot of a small bookstore where she was waiting. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, her face pale with anger and fear. My dad knows everything, she said, out of breath. Everything. I clenched my jaw. What did he say? She swallowed hard, gripping my hand. He gave me an ultimatum. I stared at her. Sofia. He told me to end it, she cut me off. That if I didn't, he would ruin your career. He wouldn't just fire you. He would make sure no one else in the industry hired you again. My heart stopped. I had expected a fight, But I hadn't expected him to burn my entire future to the ground. I told him no, she whispered. I blinked. What? Her grip on my hand tightened. I told him I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. My chest tightened. Sophia, that's reckless, she finished for me. Yeah, maybe, but I don't care. I exhaled sharply. Your dad isn't playing games. She nodded. Neither am I. I ran a hand through my hair, my thoughts racing. Her father wasn't bluffing. If he wanted to, he could destroy everything I had worked for. But there was another truth, a bigger one. I wasn't willing to lose Sophia. Not for my job. Not for anything. So I looked into her eyes and said the only thing that mattered. We'll figure it out. She exhaled, her lips parting in relief. Together, she whispered. And then she kissed me. Right there, in that empty parking lot, with the world closing in around us. A promise. A war cry. We weren't backing down. The day everything changed. We thought we had more time. We thought we could keep this between us. But we were wrong. It happened on a Friday afternoon. I was in a meeting when my phone vibrated. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. But before I could answer, my office door swung open, and in walked Mr. Collins. Everything in me froze. His eyes were sharp, cold, ruthless. Behind him, the company's HR director. My stomach dropped. This was it. Justin, Mr. Collins said, his voice eerily calm. Pack your things. Silence. The entire room was dead silent. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. You're being let go, the HR director added, as if this was just another day at the office. I clenched my fists. You're firing me. Mr. Collins gave a slow, satisfied nod. No hard feelings. But you were warned. A cold wave of rage washed over me. I could fight this. I could. But deep down, I knew he had already won. He had all the power. And I had nothing. Except for one thing. Sophia. I exhaled slowly, nodding. All right. Then I stood, collected my things, and walked out. I didn't give him the satisfaction of begging. I didn't plead for my job. I left with my head high. Because even though he had taken everything from me, he hadn't taken her. Sophia's reaction. When I stepped outside, she was already waiting. The second she saw my face, she knew. They fired you, she whispered. I nodded. Yeah. She inhaled sharply, her eyes flashing with emotion. I swear to God, Justin, I pulled her into my arms. Hey, I murmured. It's okay. She shook her head. No, it's not. He ruined your career just because we fell for each other. I finished. She looked up at me, eyes full of fire. He doesn't get to win. I smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. No, I agreed. He doesn't. She hesitated, her hands tightening on my shirt. So what do we do now? I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. We start over, I said simply. Somewhere else. Together. Her lips parted. You mean? I'm not staying here, I told her. I won't let him control us. We'll find new jobs, a new place, a fresh start. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She laughed. A real, genuine, free laugh. God, Justin, she breathed. You're insane. I grinned. A little. And then she kissed me again. Right there, in front of the building. In front of the company that had just kicked me out. In front of a world that told us we couldn't be together. We had lost the battle. But we were winning the war. The plan to leave it all behind. That night, we sat in my apartment, our hands intertwined, a bottle of cheap wine between us. So where do we go? She asked. I exhaled. Anywhere, everywhere. She smiled. And I realized, for the first time, in a long time, I wasn't scared. Because I wasn't alone. And as long as I had Sophia, I had everything I needed. We were done hiding. We were done running. And we were just getting started. The final showdown, our new beginning. The moment we decided to leave it all behind, I felt free. I had lost my job. I had burned a bridge with one of the most powerful men in the industry. And yet, sitting there with Sophia, planning our escape from everything, I felt more alive than ever. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Mr. Collins wouldn't let us go that easily. And I was right. A visit we didn't expect. 2 days later, Sophia and I were in my apartment, sorting through our options. We had spent the last 48 hours looking at job listings, apartments in different cities, and planning our next move. She was curled up on my couch, her laptop open on her lap, her face scrunched in concentration. "We could go to Boston," she said. "There's a marketing firm there that's hiring," and a knock at the door cut her off. We both froze. Her eyes flickered to mine, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then, another knock. Louder. My heart pounded. Sophia stood slowly. "Justin." I nodded, my body tensing as I walked toward the door. I knew before I even opened it. I knew who it was. And when I pulled the door open, there he stood. Mr. Collins, looking just as intimidating as ever, dressed in his usual sharp suit, his expression unreadable, his eyes like ice. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, "Can I come in?" My jaw tightened. Sophia stepped up beside me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I need to speak with Justin," he said smoothly. "Alone." I glanced at Sophia. She hesitated, then exhaled. "I'll be in the bedroom." I hated the idea of her leaving me alone with him. But I knew I had no choice. She gave me a worried look before walking down the hall. Once she was gone, I stepped aside. Mr. Collins walked inside, his presence taking up the entire room. Then he turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Sit," he ordered. I didn't. "This isn't your office," I said, crossing my arms. "You don't get to bark orders here." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Then he smirked. "So you've grown a backbone," he mused. "Good." I clenched my jaw. "Why are you here?" His smirk disappeared. "I came to make you an offer." I narrowed my eyes. "An offer?" He nodded. "Leave my daughter," he said flatly, "and I'll give you everything back." Silence. The air between us turned razor sharp. I stared at him. "Excuse me." "You heard me," he said coolly. "I'll make sure you get your job back. I'll pull a few strings, get you a better position, maybe even a raise. I'll fix your reputation." Then his gaze hardened. "But in return, you walk away. You disappear from my daughter's life. Forever." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I laughed right in his face. He raised an eyebrow. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I think it's pathetic." His expression darkened. "You can't buy me off," I said coldly. "And you sure as hell can't make Sophia love someone else. That's not how this works." He exhaled sharply. "You're making a mistake." "No," I shot back. "You are." He stepped forward, his voice lowering. "You're throwing away your entire career for a woman." I didn't hesitate. "For the woman I love." His face hardened. He had expected me to be scared, to fold. But I wasn't that guy anymore. "You think love is enough?" He scoffed. "You think it's worth losing everything?" "Yes." My answer was immediate. His jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw it. Doubt. Because deep down, maybe even he knew he was wrong. But he wasn't the type of man to admit it. Instead, he straightened, his expression turning blank. "Then you're no longer my problem," he said stiffly. And just like that, he turned and walked out. A future of our own. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, my heart racing. And then Sophia stepped into the room. Her eyes were wide. "You heard all that, didn't you?" I asked. She nodded. Then, before I could say anything else, she threw her arms around me. I held her tight, burying my face in her hair. "You really told him no?" she whispered. I pulled back, cupping her face. "Sophia, you are worth more than any job, any career. I'm not losing you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Justin." She didn't finish. She just kissed me, long, deep, and full of all the things words couldn't say. And in that moment I knew we had won. 1 year later, the sun streamed through the windows of our new apartment in Boston. Yes, our apartment. We had left everything behind. We had built a new life, together. Sophia had started her own business, something she actually wanted to do. I had found a new job at a company that valued me for who I was. And for the first time in years, we were free. No more hiding. No more looking over our shoulders. Just us. One afternoon, as I was setting up some books in our new place, Sophia walked in, holding a piece of mail. She looked different, nervous, excited. "What is it?" I asked. She bit her lip, then handed me the envelope. I opened it, then froze. It was a wedding invitation. From Mr. Collins. I looked up at her, shocked. "Your dad invited us." She nodded. "I think this is his way of making peace." I exhaled, staring at the invitation. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a declaration of approval. But it was something. And that was enough. I glanced at Sophia, who was watching me carefully. "So," I said, smirking, "are we going?" She smirked back. "Only if we show up together." I laughed, pulling her into my arms. "Then let's do it." Because no matter what happened next, one thing was certain. We had already won. Together.